So, do you have a warm-up format before you actually start playing?
I do not have a warm-up format, but maybe I should get one.
Okay, so you don't do anything before you walk out on the stage and play?
Sometimes I do. I like to hold the sticks. I like to hold them, air drum. Sometimes I do certain things on my knee, but there's no specific regimen. I can't say that I have a set regimen before I play.
And you seem to switch between traditional match grip.
Oh, yeah.
Any particular reason? Is it a feel reason? Is it?
It must be a feel thing. I think it's more intuitive because I usually forget that I actually switched.
Okay.
If it happens, it usually just happens. Then after the fact, somebody might say something, and I say, "Oh, I did that," so I think it's just like a real intuitive thing. I don't really know if I can say why I do it. I guess it's just a certain feeling I get sometimes, maybe a certain section of a composition, or just to like tap into a certain space, headspace or something. Yeah.
Okay, so obviously you have a very well-known grandfather with Roy Haynes.
Mm-hmm.
Did he help you? Did you learn from Roy when you were growing up?
I learned immensely from him, but it wasn't the kind. It was never like sit down and tell you what to do. It was never that type of relationship. It's more so just being around him and finding out, what was going on, and trying to figure out how to make sense of it in my own way. But it was never so much like, Marcus, you need to practice this or check this out. I was a sponge,
Yeah.
So whenever I was around him, I was always like watching. Every now and then I would ask a question about a certain thing, but most of it was just from studying him. Just from hanging around. I mean, he's my grandfather too, so I spent a lot of time with him. Yeah. And we always had a really great connection. And I was fortunate that, when I was... Even from when I have memories of being like 4 years old, and he would invite the family, if he was performing in a family-friendly environment, like a park or something like that, he would invite, in New York, he would invite the whole family out, so all my sisters, all my siblings, all his grandkids would come out and be there. I remember one time, he actually called us up on stage, and we actually just sat, me and my sister, we just sat on stage, but I was checking everything out, though, for sure.
What do you remember about your practice when you started getting into drums seriously? Did you have particular things that you practiced, particular books or systems?
There was more of that in the beginning. I mean, my uncle told me about, he might have been the first one to tell me about rudiments, like this is a double stroke, this is singles. But then I took some formal lessons, I did some formal studying after I had my kit maybe for about, several months. I auditioned for this program at Gilmore, Saturday program. And that's where I learned how to read music, and that's where I learned about European classical music. So I got a lot of training with that. But I'd already been playing on my own. Actually, before that, I was playing in church, so I definitely had some of that too, that foundation. And my father and my mother had a gospel group together, so that was always in my part of my foundation.
Yeah. And what age was you? Can you remember that when you were first getting up and playing with your parents in church?
Oh, well, first I was singing. I was telling Aaron and them, I was like, first time I came to Anaheim or this southern West Coast, it was with a choir, and I was singing. But, I was like 4 or 5. It was like right around 91, I think. But then, I sang, and then I played percussion, because they wouldn't let me on the drums. They wouldn't let me play drums, so I played percussion. I didn't have a kit at home, so I would just play like my uncle's kit, who lived right with us. Basically, it was like a 2-family house, so he wasn't far, and he had a drum set. He plays drums, Craig Haynes. So I would go to his place sometimes, and he would let me practice on his kit. Or when I go to my grandfather's house, I could practice. But I didn't have a drum set. I just had sticks, and that was pretty much it.
Okay.
And then finally, my grandfather gave me a kit when I was 10, and so that's when I finally had like some drums of my own to play.
Okay. A lot of people see drummers that come through the church, and obviously they have a different technique and the way they sit at a kit. Normally that's because the kit is set, and it doesn't matter how high you are, you're sitting on that kit.
You're sitting on the kit, right.
Okay,
right.
So did you find, at what stage did you start understanding about posture and the way that you could sit at a kit, instead of you just sitting on a grown-up kit, if you like?
Yeah, the first person to talk to me about posture was actually, when I was doing that program at Juilliard, I had it was kind of like a full day. You get there in the morning and you wouldn't leave until like 3 in the afternoon or something like that. on a Saturday, and so we'd have like a percussion ensemble. You play like some type of orchestra or something. You have these theory classes and history class, music history, and then you also would have a private teacher, the one who taught me how to read music. His name is Peter Gregory.
Okay.
He was the first one to talk to me about posture that I can remember. He was the first one that would talk to me about that, and I remember specifically, he was like, a lot of the greats have really great posture, and he's like, and one of the best ones to look at is Tony Williams.
Wow.
He was like, because not only is he an incredible player, but just look at him, like the way he's sitting, the way he sets up his kit, it all makes sense, and it'll have you playing that way until you die. With that type of technique, you can last a really long time. So he was the first one that kind of pointed my head in that direction, looking at posture.
Okay, so can you remember your first drum books that you learnt from?
So as a part of that program, we had to get a couple of books. I can't remember what they were though. They were like books that would have mostly snare works. Towards the end, they would have like more complex things. You have to play like triangles and all that stuff. But it was usually like an excerpt from an orchestral piece. They had a lot of excerpts that you can learn how to play. And then there was another book that had like more mallet material, like timpani and xylophone and vibraphone and marimba. But the first book I really remember the title of that I got was actually after I started doing this Saturday program at Manhattan School of Music. And my private teacher there, Jeff Krause, put me onto that modern swing solos for the Wilcoxon.
Yeah.
So that was the first one I really remember. That's actually like really the only one that I really like worked on. I was never so much into like those other ones, like stick control and all those things. I never really got into them so much.
Well, I think you said at the beginning what a really good thing about warming up and just holding your sticks, and you find your... what's the best lesson you've ever been taught or told? Or
if you feel like you're really on the path to like becoming more of yourself and finding your own voice, and there might be people along the way that tell you that it's wrong, don't listen to them. Just keep doing your thing.
Good, excellent.
That's what all the great legends told me. They've all kind of identified with that sentiment. So,
And how do you think, for the people watching this, that you find, especially now there's a lot more on education and people coming out of schools that are all playing the same and sounding the same, obviously that unique sound and your creativity, how do you think you find that?
well, you need to, I feel like, well, one of the, I don't think there's a one answer to it, but for me, you have to spend a lot of time by yourself. You have to record yourself, listen to yourself playing. A lot of times, I feel like it helps it if you have an idea of what you want to sound like. If you have like a small concept of what you're going for, then recording yourself, listening back to it, as painful as it may be, which it can be for me, it can be painful sometimes. Like, oh, I'm playing this. But as long as you know where you want to go, then it's pretty easy to identify things that you're doing that you don't want in your sound. You know what I mean? So you can kind of like easily omit, like, okay, I don't want to do that anymore. Make a conscious effort. There's also a lot of things that happen organically, so it's really like a balance of, like direct conscious efforts, but then also just like where things fall. You know what I mean? Like the organic element of it.
So are you thinking in music form when you're playing? Are you thinking about the length of notes and a musicality, or are you using a system and you're just playing off of that?
What do you mean?
Well, like I remember Alvin Jones saying that the cymbals in a jazz band are the same as an orchestra. The strings in an orchestra, the length of the notes, you take them out, they've gone. So you would always think about the length of notes more than it being a staccato note. Does that make sense? Or
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, sound is really important. To me, sound, all the people I look up to, they put a lot of attention on sound. They know how to get the same. The sound is actually within. It's not. I mean, it's nice to have the stuff that you want to play. It's nice. It's really great to have that gear, but the sound really comes from you. And definitely that's part of that for sure. So I definitely put a lot of attention on making sure that the sound is right and that I know what kind of sounds I'm going for, and your touch touches everything.
So you probably answered the question, but final question for you is, if you could pass something forward to future drummers, what would be the lesson that you'd pass forward? What advice would you give them regarding practice?
you know, try to play with people. Try to play with people. Don't. I mean, it's great to have a lot of time on your own to work things out, but ultimately, you gotta play with. You have to play with people, like other human beings. And if you can, if you're fortunate enough to be around some other musicians that are maybe stronger than you or better than you, try to play with them.
Okay.
You know, if you don't, you know, if you got to pay them or, you know, if you can't get a gig, you just want to play with them, just try to work something out so that you get a chance to play with somebody better than you. And then that always helps.
I guess your upbringing from the beginning, playing in churches, that's where you managed to play from a very early age.
Well, yeah, I did. I didn't do too much of it though. You know, I was always in the church. You know, I sang first, and I played a little bit of drums. But you know, but I was also dealing with a lot of other sides of the culture too. And it seems like everybody kind of like has some kind of foundation there, but some people kind of experiment more outside of it. You know.
Yep.
So yeah, so I had that foundation for sure, but I didn't spend too many years playing in the church though, to be honest. Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of things happening outside of the church too, you know.
Yeah.
So, but it's the same community. It's essentially the same community of people, but it's just not in that atmosphere, that particular atmosphere. So, yeah.
Okay.
You know, I feel like for me, having a chance to play with a lot of really great musicians, especially at a very early age, definitely helped my growth.
Right. Well, Marcus, thank you very much. I really enjoyed your playing.
Thank you.
I have actually followed you for quite a while as well. So yeah, thank you.
Thank
you
you
very much.
Thanks, man.